For today's session, where you will be practicing making a double pinch pot, you will need your bucket of water and sponge and your spray bottle. This will allow you to clean up and to help you keep your clay damp. From your kit, you're going to need your board, the paintbrush, plastic fork, plastic rib, your wire cutter, and the red cup. And I'd like for you to fill your red cup about 1/4 of the way up with either water or vinegar. You are also going to need the piece of clay that you used last session where you practiced making a pinch pot. Before we can begin our double pinch pot today, you need to prepare your clay. This is the piece of clay that we used last class. It's that 1/2 pound piece of clay that we used to practice making our single pinch pot. We are going to use this again, and if you recycled your clay correctly last time, this should be pretty plastic. Remember, plastic clay is clay that can be bent and molded and shaped without it breaking or falling apart on you. So what we're going to do to prepare our clay is called wedging. Wedging is just when you mix and you compress your clay particles so it's the same softness throughout the entire piece of clay. We don't want hard chunks or soft chunks, and we don't want any air bubbles that would get into the way of our pinching and creating weak areas in our wall. So, to mix our clay, we take our clay like this and we twist it in half. We turn it and we smack it back together. Twist, smack it back together. You don't want to overwork the clay because you don't want to dry it out. If you need to wet your hands as you do this with your sponge, feel free. That will help get some more water into it. And now I can compress my clay particles. I'm going to clean off my board right there so that I don't have any crumbs sticking to my clay. Compressing is just smacking your clay against your board. As I do this, it compresses the clay or moves the clay particles closer together, and it pops any air bubbles that might have been created during the recycling process or the mixing process of my wedging. When I am done, I should have a nice plastic piece of clay ready to make into a sphere for my double pinch pot. Now that we have our clay prepared, it's time to create a sphere and cut it in half. We need 2 halves that are the same size and the same depth to be able to create 2 pinch pots that are the same diameter and same depth. So I'm going to create a sphere. Just like you did last practice session, you're going to use your hands to paddle in the high points. Now that I have a sphere, I need to cut this piece of clay in half. So when you're using your wire cutter, you want to find a spot right in the middle, not off to the side, right in the middle. And you're going to push straight down, and you may have to pick this up and pull towards yourself. That's going to give you approximately 2 halves that are the same diameter and the same depth. If you have 2 of the same pieces of clay that are the same size, you're going to get, hopefully, 2 pinch pots that are the same size. Now that we have 2 pieces of clay that are the same diameter and the same thickness, we can begin creating a single pinch pot from each of these. Now here's the trick. Eventually, we're going to want to put this back together. So we want to be able to make sure that the diameter of this pinch pot is the same diameter as this pinch pot around the rim. So remember last class, you learned that the hand that holds and turns the pinch pot also controls how wide or how narrow your diameter is. Your other hand, the hand that pinches, also controls how wide or narrow your pinch pot is. It all is about the angle from your tip of your thumb to your wrist. If this line goes straight up from the center, your wall will go straight up. If the angle goes outward at an angle from the center, your pinch will go outward and your diameter will be wider. So let's start on our first half. Do not forget to overlap your pinches and go all the way around until you feel like that wall is about 1/4 inch or the same thickness as your pencil. Then you gradually move up and do another rotation. I'm going to speed this process up. Here's my pinch pot. Now, I need to make sure that this diameter and the final diameter of this pinch pot are the same. So the same distance across, because I want those two to match up. Right now, they don't. And this is solid while this is hollow. Remember, this will expand in size as you pinch. Go right in the middle. If your hand gets tired, put your pinch pot down on the lip. And if you feel like your clay is getting a little dry, add some water to your hands with your sponge. Now, every once in a while, I'm going to check. It's better if you make your pinch pot, that is your second pinch pot, more narrow, because you can always make it wider, but you can't make it more narrow, okay? Every time. All right, so that's about the size I want. I'm gonna go back in and pinch. So those are about the same size. So now I have two pinch pots that are the same height, and they're the same diameter. Now I'm ready for my next step. For the next step, we're going to join these two pieces of clay together to make our closed hollow form. So, how do we do that? We need to score, we need to slip, we need to reinforce, and we need to stitch and compress. So I'm going to show you those 4 steps. For this step, you're going to need your little red container with either a little water or a little vinegar. You're going to need your paintbrush and your fork and your thumbs, okay? So the first step is called scoring. Scoring means that you're just going to scratch the 2 surfaces that are going to be attached to one another, okay? So when you do this, you want it to be very messy. And you need to dig deep in with your fork. So you can hold your fork this way, you can hold your fork this way, whatever works, okay? So this is the right way. This is the wrong way. If you are just barely scratching the surface and your lines are too far apart, that is not enough, okay? You really need to dig in and scratch that surface deeply. You do not want to skip this step. This acts as a way to suction those two surfaces together. If you just had a smooth surface, it would slide and come apart. So this is going to help us mix those two surfaces together. Our next step is to go in with our water or our vinegar. Now, it doesn't matter which one that you use. If you have vinegar at home, I know it's kind of smelly, but it actually works a lot better than the water because it's an acid and it helps break down your clay surface so that it is better, more easily able to stick together. Okay, so we're going to create what we call a slip using the scratched surface and our water or our vinegar. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to dab water on this surface. So this is one way that we can create slip. In another lesson, I'm going to show you how to make your own slip, which is just a liquid clay. So when we're making our slip, after you've watered down your scratch marks, you're going to go back in one more time and you're just going to mess that up. And you're going to notice that the clay is going to be kind of loose in that area. It's going to be kind of liquidy. Okay. So now I have scored and slurried or slipped those two pieces. And then I'm going to put them together. So I want to make sure that I'm really eyeballing where those two surfaces are meeting. And then once they're together, it might be a little slippery here at first, but you're just going to take your thumbs and you're going to push the clay towards itself. And this isn't a race. You want to take your time, but you want to get a good suction on there. Okay. All right, so that is step 1 and 2. We have scored and we have added slip. For the next step, which is reinforcing, we're going to use this piece of clay that we set off to the side. We're going to actually make this into a long rope. So I'm going to put my double pinch pot off to the side, and I'm going to grab my sponge and I'm going to wet this hand a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start my long rope by squishing the clay into a really long rope. And it's not going to be perfect. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to roll it from the bottom to the top of my board to make something as skinny as I possibly can. Notice as I do this, I'm moving my coil to the right every time, and I'm just rolling what is in the middle of my board. When you think that you have a coil that is about the same circumference or length as the circumference of your pot, you've got it long enough. Okay? So what I did right there is I just laid that coil over my seam. And now I'm squishing that gently. So you can kind of see, I'll do it from the side. You can see how I'm just kind of flattening that. What I'm doing here is I'm reinforcing. I'm adding a little bit of clay in that seam. That's going to be my weak point, okay? Because I don't want that to split apart later on when it's drying or when I'm manipulating it. The next thing I'm going to do, which is my last step, is I'm going to stitch and compress. So I'm going to stitch the clay by using my fork again, and I'm going to mix that clay right in to my double pinch pot. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm mixing all the clay together that's in that area where the seam and the reinforcing coil are. And I'm going to go different directions. This makes it a lot easier to compress the clay if I stitch first. Also, the stitching allows me to mix the clay and make that connection a lot tighter. Okay, so I've stitched it. Now I am going to compress with the back of my thumb. I'm not going to get rid of any clay. I'm just going to smooth it out. I can use the pad of my thumb too. And I'm not pushing very hard. I'm just barely moving the clay around, shifting it into other areas where clay is needed. It's easier if your thumb is a little dry when you're doing this. If it's too wet, it'll just slide across the surface. So you want to have a little bit of friction here to be able to grab the clay and move it where you want it to go. So once I have that compressed, I can take my thumb and start smoothing that out. You can go different directions. You can use your thumb again. Okay. And once that kind of gets compressed in there and mixed, then you can start using a little water on your thumb to finish it up. Now, one other thing that you can use is a clean board. And you can use that as your paddle, and you can lightly tap your doubled pinch pot to get rid of any finger marks or high or low areas. You can also use your plastic card, what we call a rib, and you can use this card to smooth out your surface. Notice I'm not getting rid of any clay. I'm not scraping away the clay because I need that clay there for if I want to decorate and carve. So I'm kind of using it, I'm not using it straight on, I'm at an angle, and I'm just compressing the clay that way. And then I can dampen my thumb one more time just to get that nice and smooth. So this is going to be kind of squishy. It's got an air pocket in it. It'll support itself as long as you don't use too much pressure. Okay? But that is your double pinch pot. That is a form that's hollow and closed. Okay? If you know how to do this, you can combine multiple pinch pots to make really tall structures, wide structures, complex structures, okay? So if you use your imagination, the possibilities are limitless. So there is my double pinch pot. Now that you have your double pinch pot, you are ready to document your progress. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your double pinch pot in half. We don't want to cut along our seam. What I want to do is I want to cut across the seam. So if this is my seam, I want to cut this way. I'm going to cut straight through, being very careful. I may have to lift this up at the end and pull that way, and that will open up. So when I look at my two halves, I should see where that inside seam is. What I would like for you to do to document your progress I would like for you to have one of your sides upside down and one right side up. That will allow me to see what your surface looks like and if you've hidden your seam, and will also let me see how thick your wall is as well. Once you have documented your progress, it is time to either reuse your clay for another double pinch pot if you're not happy with the first one, or you can recycle. Here is how you reuse your clay. Just like last class, you spray the inside of your pot, place them inside of each other, and squish them together. And then you wedge, just like I showed you at the beginning of the video. Twist, twist it, smack it back together. Twist it, smack it back together. And then pound it against your board. This pounding action will get rid of any air bubbles that you will have in your clay. This is now ready to put back into a sphere if you want to make a double pinch pot, or you can recycle it. Recycling is when you squish your clay into a flat pancake. So I'm using my pinching action right there. Then I'm going to take my bucket and I'm going to dip my clay real fast. I'm going to fold it in half and dip again. And then this will go into my plastic bag. If you have any other chunks of clay left over from your reinforcement coil, you should put that in with that piece of clay as well. After you have documented your process and you've taken pictures, make sure that you clean up